What does a completed Chimera Shadow Garden look like? Two possible scenarios come to mind. Of course, it's all cope and headcanon because Jujutsu Kaisen is gone and never returning. But God, I really hope for one more character guide and maybe we'll get another novel written by someone else, but we'll see. One is a more tamed headcanon, the other is a bit more out of the box, but it's also a bit more fun. It's an old theory I cooked up way back during the Reggie and Megumi fight. I personally think it's badass, and I'd bet Sukuna would even give it 4 thumbs up. However, I must admit that it's a theory derived from my bias as a Megumi fan. It's hard being a Megumi fan. But you know it's not hard? Subscribing and liking the video. I've been branching out to different topics and got some big projects cooking up. And I appreciate everybody, thank you, and enjoy. Peace. Chapter 171 came out 4 years ago, and that was a more hopeful time for us Megumi fans. A lot has happened since then, and our perception and view of Megumi has changed. I think it's fair to say that everyone had high expectations of what Megumi was going to look like at the end of the series. I mean, I'm sure even the haters expected Megumi to have some grand move or some big play at the end. And a lot of us most likely thought it would be the full realization of his domain expansion, Chimera Shadow Garden. And that's what we'll be talking about today. Earlier in the video, I talked about 2 possible scenarios, the 2 headcanons that I came up with for Megumi's full realized domain expansion. The more tamed one is about Mahoraga, and I think we could all agree that Mahoraga is the deepest thing in Ten Shadows' bag. This scenario is about the structure that appears behind Megumi when he opens up his domain expansion against Reggie. The Gashadokuro is a yokai from Japanese mythology. That was a pretty popular opinion as to what Megumi's domain would be or what would grow from that skeleton behind him. The Gashadokuro is a yokai that basically is made up of skulls of people who have died on the battlefield and not gotten a proper burial. I personally never believed it to be that, and still don't. But I do think it is able to bring back a certain thing. Megumi would actually be able to revive all the shadows that he has lost, like the Orochi. But not only that, I think it could also be an important part into taming Mahoraga. To what extent, I'm not even sure. But I could see it almost being like a beacon to maybe catch Mahoraga's attention to attack it. Kind of like taunting him. Which would give Megumi time to set up his play in order to try and take down Mahoraga in one big blow. This scenario also requires Megumi to have tamed the piercing ox. I won't debate or argue with anybody on the correct way to tame Mahoraga. I personally think he should just get Maki involved along with him and she wouldn't be included in the actual ritual to fight Mahoraga. But if you don't agree with that, cool, that's fine. But in this scenario, let's just say he summons his domain expansion, he pops Mahoraga's ritual, and let's say Mahoraga does attack that structure in the back. Then Megumi would summon a bunch of piercing bulls and have them charge up in the shadows. 4 or 5 of them ram Mahoraga. We don't know the upper limits of piercing bulls like damage, but that's good enough for a start. After all, this video isn't really about how to tame Mahoraga, there's a bunch of videos out there already. So to recap, this version of the domain expansion is essentially just to tame Mahoraga. It's all for Mahoraga. The entire domain expansion lives to get the sorcerer to tame Mahoraga, because that is the deepest thing in their bag. And if you're thinking to yourself, well, why didn't the other Ten Shadows user just do that? You gotta remember, the whole mindset behind summoning Mahoraga is a final ditch effort to take your opponent out along with yourself. So it would make sense that no one would actually try to summon him unless they were actually sacrificing their life in battle. And that's basically it for the first scenario. Now the second one is a bit different. It's about the Ten Shadows domain being incomplete on purpose. Not necessarily a barrierless domain, but just an incomplete domain in general. I think that anything trapped inside Chimera Shadow Garden, the shadows it gives off are meant to become the shadows of Chimera Shadow Garden itself. This would come into play mostly for domain clashes and may even lend itself to going up against someone with an open domain expansion. That's why it's meant to be incomplete. And remember, it is one of the big 3 families domain expansions. We've only seen one, and that's Unlimited Void from Gojo, and we know that's crazy. And I'm not saying this one is as crazy as Gojo's domain, but it would still be pretty fucking crazy. Like, imagine once all of the shadows inside the domain have been taken over by Chimera Shadow Garden, it now renders that opponent's domain expansion as the creator of Chimera Shadow Garden. Now, I don't mean that Megumi would be able to weaponize the opponent's sure hit on them. It would just render their sure hit gone. Then basically the whole barrier becomes Megumi's. So now his opponent wasted his domain expansion, burnt out curse technique, within a barrier that he can't escape, and Megumi has his Abyss of Shadows. For most sorcerers, that's GG, game over. No escape, and you have to deal with multiple copies of Shikigami and clones of Megumi attacking you. I think that's worthy of a Big 3 family domain expansion. And I don't think it's necessarily too much glaze for Megumi to be able to do something like that. After all, there are still sorcerers in the verse that would be able to beat him in that scenario. So it's not overly OP, just some Megumi glazing like I'm spinning on it for him to try and give him the most busted domain expansion. And I mean, honestly, shadow powers in anime is just kind of busted in general. I mean, a lot of the shadow users can control other people or manipulate other people's shadows. I don't think it's too unreasonable for Megumi's Abyss of Shadows to take over all the shadows within a domain and basically rendering it his barrier at that point. Unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever get the full extent of what his domain expansion is supposed to look like. Even if Gege does drop another character guide, I don't see him circling back to explain everyone's domain expansions and their full functions. But I do want to hear what you think Megumi's domain expansion would look like. Or if you have any other suggestions or recommendations for videos you want to see, let me know in the comment section below. And I want to just let you guys know I have started a Kagurabachi podcast, exclusively Kagurabachi weekly chapter content with my boy Dice. I'll put the link to that channel in the description below. Check it out. I appreciate all the support, and don't forget to subscribe. And remember, stay normie, stay weeb, shit even in between is fine. Until next time, peace.